peace be upon his soul. The greatest of prophets, Islam was his only hope.
Three things we should get. The Prophet ﷺ was telling the Sahaba that this is your life, that Allah has decreed for you. And this is going to end. And this is how you see your life. And then you have these false hopes, these dreams that extend beyond what Allah Ta'ala had decreed for you. And then on the other side, he was trying to show you as well that he put on both sides, these are obstacles, things that will happen to you. And the Prophet said at the end of the hadith, you may get over one obstacle and then another one will catch up with you. But your false hopes, your false dreams, they continue on and they kind of go outside the box. So I just want everybody to look at this. Go home and think about your life and how do you see your life. Do you have these false dreams, these hopes? And what are they? I shoulda, coulda, woulda, if I had, I might do this. The Prophet ﷺ described those as your amal, your dreams, your hopes, which are false hopes. But he said you should look at your ajlihi. You know, what is the sake, how Allah has set up your life for you. And then you have these obstacles, things that's going to happen to you consistently in your life. These fitna, these tests, these trials. And as you come to these roadblocks, how do you handle them as a Muslim? Because the Prophet ﷺ said you may do something to get around one. But you may get around one and then the next one's going to stop you. It's going to keep, this is how your life is designed. So, you know, if you study psychology and all that, Freud or Pavlov with his dogs or Como or Poussin or whoever will come out and give you these nice little scenarios of how your life should be with your Eid, your super Eid, and all this other nonsense, right? To determine. But the Prophet ﷺ gave us a box for us to look at our life. So you should go home and look at yourself and say, where am I? How do I handle the obstacles given to me by Allah Ta'ala? You know, do I try to work my way around them, or do I look at them and understand that these are things that Allah has put in my path? And then as my life is here, or do I have these false dreams or these false hopes that I'm constantly sitting around my room or at home at night? If I do this, if I get an A in this course, if I get a B, you don't study, you ain't going to get that, right? So you go about life dreaming and hoping. But the Prophet ﷺ said, that's beyond what Allah Ta'ala has prescribed for you. So I just wanted you to have that because it's an important hadith. But the Prophet ﷺ took enough importance to draw it on the ground for the Sahaba to show them. And sometimes you may see the lines. If I gave you the hadith, some people draw the lines this way and broken. But this is the Uthaymin version of the hadith that he brings in Riyadh al-Salihin. This is his version of the block. So I gave you this one. And just something to look at when you go home and think about, you know, and from a psychological point of view when you look at your life. Okay? We want to start. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. But bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We're going to talk today about, he asked me about backbiting and slandering. But before we go into that, we need to understand the terms. There are 4 terms that deal with this. There's one called riba. Everybody knows riba. As we all know riba, and we're going to define them, we say always is backbiting. So what is namima? Does anyone know namima?
Slandering.
Slander. So what is buhtan?
Buhtan. To put false charges on someone.
False charge, just to lie on someone.
Yeah.
So what is riba?
Interest.
No, now, riba is also, as the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, arba riba. He said the worst riba is istatala mara, or istatala or shatama a'radu mara. He said the worst riba is to defame the honor of your brother, to strip him down, to lie on him. So when we start talking about backbiting, slandering, false hopes, we have to include the concept of riba, because one of the babs, one of the types of riba that the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, riba thalatha wa sab'una baba, that riba has 73 ways of performing that you can fall into riba. Wa aysaraha, he said in the easy of it, or the lowest, the aysar, you know, is mithla an yankahu rajulan ummuhu, like a person who marries, a person who will marry his own mother. But he said, inna arba'a riba, but the worst of all riba is to defame the honor of a Muslim. So this is when we start talking about backbiting and slandering, we would think sometimes that the Prophet ﷺ described, he said, okay, you think sleeping with a person's mother is a filthy, dirty thing. But the Prophet said that is smaller in comparison with Allah Ta'ala than you defaming the honor of your brother. So we have to be very careful when we start falling into these things of backbiting and slander. But now when he talked about ghiba, and we're going to go into some of the hadith, he said, ghiba dhikra aqaqa bima yakrah. He said, ghiba is saying something about your brother you know he will not like. He said, ara'ayta in kana ala akhi ma aqul. He said, what if what I'm saying about my brother is true? So he said, if it's true, then it's ghiba. But if it's not true, he called it buhtan. Buhtan in that case is like it's falsehood. It's a type of slander, it's a type of lie. So this is the first thing we look at when we do that. And then the next one is namima. So what is namima in this case? Did I get any answers for namima? Anybody? Namima is just for me and you to start to talk about someone, and the only reason you're saying that is to throw, you know, like a dark light on an individual. Just say, you see, did you hear about so-and-so? You know what I heard he did? Now that goes beyond backbiting, because, you know, backbiting, you may say it and it may be true, but you know you shouldn't talk about your brother behind his back. But namima is you go to someone else and start spreading these false rumors, and your whole purpose of it is to cause someone else to start spreading it as well, for the lie to continue on and on. So this is namima. So that's a little bit different than ghiba. And then you have this buhtan, which is you just outright lie in your slander. You know, you just make it up and you start spreading. So, and then we have the riba, which is the fourth type as well. But when we go over these four more in depth, when can you make backbiting and slandering with a person? We need to clear that up, because that's always an issue. There's 6 cases in fiqh where I can criticize you behind your back and it's not haram. Is anybody familiar with those? Any ideas?
When you commit a sin in public, can you make it public?
Yeah, when you commit a sin, when someone's done something haram, this is very important. If you know a brother and sister may be getting high, or he don't pray or something like that, in particular for you brothers, and you know you have sisters, or you become a father or your mother one day, and you have children, and your daughter wants to marry somebody, and you know you may know something about that brother. The brother may be committing haram. It's not backbiting to go to the father or to someone like that and say, you know, you shouldn't marry that brother because the brother doesn't pray, or I see the brother getting high, or the brother's, you know, this or that. And that's not backbiting in that case, if it's true, because now you're protecting the honor of the other Muslim. You know, and that's, so in that case, it's good. And complaining about mistreatment. Like if a sister comes and say, my husband beats me, or my husband treats me like I'm a slave, or whatever. You know, if she comes to the imam complaining about her husband, about something that he doesn't, because the Prophet ﷺ has said in another hadith, he said that the believer man will not dhulm, he will not yuzlam, he will not wrong a believing woman, meaning he won't oppress her. So if you know that he's oppressing his wives, or like you know a brother, he's been beating women, or something like that, so you say, look, sister, you shouldn't marry that brother because the last sister he knocked across the room, or something like that. You know what I mean? So you need to let a person know, because that becomes important, because this is how you protect the honor. So this is not backbiting, slandering, anything in that case. You know, and so you and another one is like if you're seeking a fatwa, a fatawa. So you need fatawa about a certain situation. You know, so you might go to the Sheikh and you say, look, this is the situation, and everybody knows what you're talking about it, but you need to understand what is the Islamic ruling on this. In that case, it's not bad. Or you're seeking to remove an evil from the community. And I give you an example of a case. You know, a brother, he impregnated a non-Muslim woman, got her pregnant, had a baby, right? He came to the masjid, he told the board of directors that I impregnated a woman, and so they said, oh man, well, we're going to keep this a secret. Should they have kept it a secret? Why? Yeah, because he will do it again, right? Or he may want to marry another sister, and now these certain sisters are forbidden to him, and he marries a sister and she finds out later. So you're not protecting the honor of the other Muslims. And these are actually cases I'm talking about, that things happen and people cover them up, not understanding, because they misunderstand what is backbiting or covering our brother's fault. You cover your brother's fault many times by the Prophet ﷺ has made it clear. He said you take his hand and you stop him from doing it. You don't cover your brother's fault when it's going to cause the harm to another Muslim. You know, this is why we have the Sharia in Islam, the hudud of the Prophet ﷺ. And in the hadith, just to clarify that a little bit further, just on that type of example. He said the Prophet ﷺ, a woman came to him one time, and she said that, look, Prophet ﷺ, I've committed a sin, I've committed adultery. So the Prophet ﷺ told her to leave. You come back. Why did he tell her to leave? No, he wasn't angry. That wasn't the main reason. In fact, what would be the reason?
Because he's a man and she committed it.
No, because in a woman, you cannot carry out a hard punishment until you find out whether the woman is pregnant. Right? So the Prophet told her to leave. When she came back, she said she was pregnant. So the Prophet ﷺ said, go have your baby and come back again. So when she had the baby, she came back. So the Prophet said, suckle your child and then come back to me later. So how long was this?
A couple of years by now.
How many months is this? 34, 35. The 10 months of pregnancy, or 40 weeks, however we want to do it, 9 months, 10 months, 40 weeks, however you count that up, right? Then what?
2 years.
2 years, how long do you suckle a child? 2 years, so that's 34 months, correct? So when the woman came back in the 34 months, the Prophet carried out the hudud on her, right? He gave her child to someone else to carry out the hudud. But then again, when they bring these hadith like this, when they talk about the man that was drinking, and he said he loves Allah and His Messenger, but the Prophet carried out the hudud, but he said you don't slander your brother when you do that. If there's something they do wrong, and then the punishment of Allah Ta'ala is a certain punishment. After that punishment has been carried out, you don't go around talking about it. You know what happened to so-and-so, guess what they did to so-and-so, or such and such about so-and-so. This is where the backbiting and slandering starts to come in. Because after that happens, you're supposed to, as the Prophet ﷺ told Khalid ibn Walid one time, when Khalid was beating the guy for drinking, he said, don't help shaitan against your brother, means don't slander your brother while you're doing it. You do what Allah Ta'ala has said you should do, and you leave it at that. So I just wanted to bring those points up first, because they're very important, because many times, I mean, Abdullah said y'all call it drama or something like that. A lot of this drama, as he told me, y'all, that's the good word for it. A lot of this drama is because of our misunderstanding of the terms in Islam. You know, and so if we understand the terms and understand them, all four of these are what? Kaba'ir. They're major sins. That if you commit them, they require tawbah. There's not a sin where you just say, astaghfirullah, I'm going to stop and do it. They require tawbah because all these fall under the category of a kaba'ir, which is a major sin in Islam. So if I commit ghibah, and then why would a person commit ghibah? And Ibn Taymiyyah brings a good point. He says sometimes people commit ghibah, and he brings several different reasons. Sometimes because you're jealous of an individual. So you go to someone and you start talking about that person out of your jealousy. And then another time you might do it because you're angry. This is why the Prophet ﷺ said you don't accept the witness of a person when he's angry. So if I'm mad at that person and someone comes to me and I'm angry and I start telling you something, you can't accept it from that person until they calm down. Because many times in anger you may say something slanderous or wrong about an individual, or you may reveal something that is dark secret. And then other times people do it for power, as we see this with politics, you know, and particularly in the West. You know, if any of you follow the election is just one lie. You don't know what the truth is. Because you see one commercial says this, and the guy in the next commercial comes right behind him and says the exact opposite. He said, you know, and so, you know, in Islam that's forbidden. You know, the way this system is set up would be forbidden in Islam. Because I cannot come out and make an advertisement against you, which I know is false, or which I'm doing sound bites and I'm bending the truth. So this type of attitude is wrong in Islam as well. And so what is another case when a person might commit this type of thing? You know, out of what? Envy, jealousy, anger, politics, ignorance. But is there an excuse for ignorance? Is there? If you do it out of ignorance, will you still be held accountable on Yawm al-Qiyamah?
Yeah.
Yes. And that's very important many times. So what you do, you should correct your brother. But as you as young Muslims, you must first be able to correct yourself with this thing. If you're committing ghibah, you have to stop. If you're committing namima, you need to stop. But many of us like that gossip. We call it gossip. I mean, you know, oh man, so what's the latest on so-and-so? You joking out? No way.
Allah knows. And whatever lies in the heavens and the heavens, every star in this whole universe, Allah knows.
They didn't make the dua. So remember the dua that you say that when Allah Ta'ala's messenger told you, say, oh Allah, protect us, you know, protect me, protect, you know, your wife, protect the child from shaitan. And whatever you give us from this union, protect it. He said if the person says that when they're having relations or whatever, and they conceive a child, and that child will not be touched by shaitan. But many times, people involved, they don't make this dua. So even at conception, there's a dua. And then as a person goes through his life and he marries and other things, there are aspects of his life, everything in his life is covered. So,
how about afterwards? Is the person allowed, like, how does he redeem himself?
how does he redeem himself for what?
For like what his parents didn't do?
Well, you can't redeem yourself for what your parents didn't do. I mean, they didn't do it, they didn't know many times, but as a Muslim, you should know. And then that's why we can't say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Yes, there's La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wusaha. Allah doesn't place a burden on a person greater than compared, but that's why we're supposed to study Islam. Because on Yom Al-Qiyamah, that ignorance won't be an excuse, but that's why Allah said the Prophet ﷺ tells us no one in a Jannah except by the mercy of Allah. Because our deeds will not be enough. Because if we look at the hadith, just like we talked about last time, if we take all the Sahih hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and we get over the number over 7,000, 8,000, and we know 100, we know less than 1% of what the Prophet ﷺ said. So we know less than 1% of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The mercy of Allah is all we can rely on. So we're going to face Allah with 1% knowledge of the Sunnah, or 2%, or 3%. So our knowledge is very limited as it is. So the mercy of Allah becomes very important. This is why we discuss these hadith many times, because we need to understand, because most of us would never think that the worst type of riba, as the Prophet describes, is to strip the honor of your brother, to talk about your brother. You know what I mean? Istatala, and istatala, actually, the concept is to rape, to strip down. And we see this when people get mad many times. They come to you, well, I hate that sister. That sister, boy, she Muslim butt. How you get she Muslim butt? And then you start cutting it, you just start eating their flesh. And you hear it all the time, whoa, it's not like if you want to go with that conversation, I'm going to leave. Because you don't want to be involved in that sin at that particular time. But the Prophet said there's 73 chapters of riba, there's 73 doors of riba, and he said that this was the worst. If someone came to you, and we all deal with riba from the money perspective, and that's the only one we know, right? But the Prophet ﷺ didn't give us all 73 that we know. But he gave us the one about money. He gave us about, a type of riba or person approaching his mother or sleeping with his mother. Then he gave us the worst one was to defame the honor of your brother. So it's very important that the Muslims look at that and protect themselves from that. So any question on that point there?
Yes.
Yes.
What if you're exposing the flaws of your loved one to protect them?
How do you mean?
Like, what if this person, or your brother in this case, is harming others and you're exposing those flaws to stop them from committing those sins again?
No, then you can do that. Because in the case when you're protecting the honor of the Muslim, you have to. Because, he said there is no riba against the fasiq, a person who has committed an act of fusuq.
But it doesn't depend which way you do it, though?
Yes, but the best way to do it, the first you try to go to that person and tell them to stop. But then if he's involved with other people, you have to warn those people. Because say in particular, like for instance, as we talked about, if a person's trying to marry, you warn that person. Over, you're out with that person, he's getting high, and you see he's getting high, so you have to tell the Muslims, look, can you help my brother because he's getting high? Can you take him and stop him from doing that? A person said, why you involved? No, he's like, because if you cover it up and he continues, he's not getting salat accepted for 40 days. Right? So for me to cover that up and allow him to continue to do that, I'm doing him a disservice. So what I should do, I come and I tell the Muslims, look, you might tell another brother, can you come with my brother and help him, take him to the masjid to do these things, because this is what he's doing. Who cares whether they get mad or not? You need to worry about their soul. Right? Look, I'm trying to help you. Like the Prophet said, help your brother if he's wrong or he's been wrong. Many times we can help our brother when he's been wrong, but that friendship, sometimes we take it further in Islam. We remember the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, if Fatima bint Muhammad stole, he would cut her hand off. So how should we be many times with that? So it's not really exposing, because what happens is, if a person gets involved in it, and I know from, I used to be in Jahiliyyah myself, the more you let it go, the deeper you fall into it. It ain't none of this like, I'm gonna get it together. You never get it together by yourself. You may get it together for a week, but the moment something happens to you, you fall back in it. So it's very important that the Muslim understands that that's not a type of slander and backbiting. That slander and backbiting when you're just doing that to be malicious. You know, a person's sin has been covered, they done the hudud, and then you just go put out, yo, you see what happened? You know, or you're not sure, you see a brother with somebody, you know, I saw him with this sister last night, or I don't know, or I don't think that brother, he ain't no good Muslim, I don't know, I just get this vibe. You know, these vibes, I don't know where these vibes come from. But you know, we talk a lot about the vibes. You know, I got a feeling. So you got a feeling. You got any delil for that feeling? No, I ain't got no delil, so nix that feeling until you have some delil. You know, so that's how we have to operate in Islam. So, you know, you have to have proof before you expose it. You can keep that feeling to yourself. Say, you know, because I ain't like the way he looked at me. So, yeah, so I can't stand that brother. But don't tell nobody. If that's how you feel, you got to pray that Allah removes it from you, but you can't go, you know, man, I don't like that brother. I think something wrong with that brother. You say, yeah, I'm feeling the same way. So you start feeling. And then 3 or 4 more people start feeling it. And then nobody wants to speak to the brother. Say, why y'all ain't talk to that brother? Well, we feel that he ain't. And that ain't Islam. That's not the way the Muslim operates. And that's a dangerous precedent. Because that becomes the namima. Because now you're going back and forth amongst the people to spread these falsehoods about the person in order to destroy their character amongst the Muslims. So, you know, you can't operate like that. Any other question on that?
Do we still cover it up if it was in the past?
Yeah, in the past and it's gone. And you always encourage a person to make tawbah. And remember, and it's very important, one of the conditions of tawbah that the scholars of Islam bring out that we kind of forget that when a person makes tawbah, you don't go expose your sin to other people. You don't go brag about it, right? If you make tawbah, you can't sit there, I remember last week when I used to get high and stuff. No, you can't do that. Ain't no when I used to start talking about that, because now if you made tawbah, part of your tawbah meant that you had remorse about that. If you have remorse, you ain't talking about it with that smile on your face. Yeah, boy, back in the day when I wasn't practicing Islam, I used to, oh, wow. You know, you need to, you know, because now you've lost what you made tawbah for, because the first condition of the tawbah was you had remorse. And you went back to Allah. But as the scholars of Islam, like Ibn Taymiyyah and others, bring the point that the Prophet ﷺ said, mujahara, that you do not expose, you don't broadcast your sin, right? Because somebody might see that and look at you, well, so-and-so used to do that. Look at him now, he's a good Muslim. Would that mean if I do it, maybe I'll come back one day? You know, so now you're giving a person an excuse for his weakness. So in Islam, we don't expose our sins to other people. Because, you know, if you did it and Allah didn't expose it, then you don't tell anyone else. Right? You know, we're not Catholics. We don't go in the box and say, forgive me, I have sinned, and then you start confessing. The way we deal it, we take it to Allah. You make your salah, and you ask Allah Ta'ala to forgive you. You have that remorse, and you never try to go back. Because if Allah covers it, then He's giving you a chance to, you know, redeem yourself. But you don't go out, and then after you do that, you don't come back 2, 3 years later. You know, like you see these people, they go to NA, AA, and all these other AAs, and they stand up and say, I'm an alcoholic, and I want to share, and they start doing this. This is not an Islamic attitude. And you know, you have Muslims that, you know, when we was younger Muslims, I remember in Philadelphia, when they had over 300 or 400 Muslims who were going to NAAA. They used to, and you know, we had to go out there and start giving dawah to these brothers to get them out of that. Because they, you know, because every week you sit down and you sharing and you reliving that sin and doing that, then you're destroying your tawbah. Because the point of the tawbah in Islam is that, you know, that after you do it, you don't want nothing, you don't want to speak about it.
What if they do that before the tawbah?
Huh?
If they go to the AA classes or whatever.
Yeah, then you need to let them know that they need to get out of that, because part of that whole NA, because you say that there's there's a power, I have no power over this, right? And that statement right there is incorrect, because Shaitan is the waswa that suggested that to you. And now you're saying I have no power over Iblis, but Allah tells us we have power, and Iblis said, "Inni da'awtukum fastajabtum." They only call you and you come. So Iblis only has the power of suggestion. We have to remember that. Iblis is an advertiser, executive. He advertises stuff to you. He suggests things to you, and you bite, right? And that's the important thing. The people that fall into these things, you know what I mean, they do it because they want to do it. Because if you ask anybody who commits a sin, why did they do it? it felt good to them somehow. Why did you go out there and rob that bank? A guy knows that going in the bank with a gun is haram, but I got the rush, or I needed that money. He's got some excuse. So, you know, that ain't an iblis. Iblis may have planted, the waswas may have planted the suggestion, but the action is yours. You know, that's why we have to take responsibilities for our actions in this life. You know, that devil made me do a thing, that's a Christian concept. That's not the Islamic concept. You know, because Iblis tells you when it's all over and everybody's hellfire, when he stands up and gives his speech as Ibn Kathir relates in hell. And he said, you know, I promised and you promised, but Allah's promise came true. I only called you. Don't blame me, blame yourself. You know, and so that's very important for the Muslim to understand. So going back to even that point about backbiting and slandering and stuff like that, people do it because they like it. You know, that's why people watch these reality shows and other things. They do these things because they like it. It brings them pleasure. You know, so that's why the Prophet ﷺ makes it clear to the Muslim in the hadith, which is Sahih and Abu Dawood, that you should never watch a show where people discussing their personal lives, their sex lives, or anything like that. Because he said it's like watching the male and female jinn have sex in the street. So you can't sit there, you be hearing them kufa and stuff like that. So and so is messing with so and so. Did you see it on the news? This is a conversation again that the Muslim turns away from, because like I say, who wants to watch pornographic stuff? So the Prophet ﷺ is letting them know that what the kuffar defines as pornography is not the Islamic definition of pornography. The Islamic definition is to discuss it, to listen to it, to read about it, or to see. So if I listen to it, it's considered pornography. If I read about it, right? Or if I'm discussing something about my own personal life, or I'm listening to somebody discuss theirs, then it's a pornographic conversation. So the Muslim has to avoid those things, because those things are forbidden by our Lord, Allah Ta'ala. And remember, as Allah Ta'ala said, تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. You may dislike something and it is good for you. تَحِبُّ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. You may love a thing and it's bad for you. But it's Allahu a'lamu wa anta la ta'lam. But Allah knows and you don't know. So he sent the Prophet ﷺ to teach us about these things, so we know what are the limits set by Allah. That's why I gave that box. Because that box also, you look at your life inside of the box. The Caliph always tell you to think outside of the box. Yeah, if you do a business and stuff like that, you're thinking outside of the box. But when you try to worship Allah Ta'ala, you need to stay inside of the box that's given to us by the Prophet ﷺ. When you start thinking outside of that Islamic box, that's when you start falling into the haram. Because that's when things start getting, un-Islamic. So it's very it's very important for you to learn to think inside of the box. Any other questions on that issue?
Can I just add something? Like to what you said about like Allah knows like what's good for you and what's bad. Yeah. But also I heard a hadith that if something bad happens to you, it might only seem bad, but it might be good for you.
Yeah, but remember the Prophet ﷺ warned that as well. He said anything that befalls the Muslim is good for him, right? If he becomes sick, if he falls, he trips, because everything removes the sin from him. So you may slip, right? You may fall, or you may become sick. For the believer is good. And remember, this is why it's so important that, like the Prophet said, when you're young, you prepare for your old age. Or when you're healthy, you prepare for your sickness. Because when a Muslim is sick in the hospital, right, he may not be able to make wudu. He may not be able to pray. He may be morphined up or whatever. Remember, Allah Ta'ala's messenger said, he sends an angel. He said, your servant is sick and he can't do that. The Prophet said that Allah said, continue to reward him and write down for him in the same way he used to do before he became sick. So if you go into the masjid, you're praying 5 times a day, then you're in good shape. Many of us go to the person when they're dying on their deathbed and we want to read Quran over them and do all this. They're in better shape than you right now, because if they was a good Muslim before they got sick, then they're getting all that barakah that they used to get, because the angels still write down for you, yeah, 5 salah, the fast of Ramadan, the good deeds, everything you used to do when you were well. So, but if you weren't doing them things when you were in good health, yeah, you need that extra dua from everybody. But the sick person many times on his deathbed is in a better condition than we are, if he was solid before that time. And that's very important. That's why when we go there, the wailing and the stuff like that, we need to visit the sick. Going to visit the sick is a barakah for us. But the Prophet ﷺ said, the angels, this is the right you have, come with you, 70,000 angels. All these good hadith about you going to visit the sick. But you don't see a lot about what is the barakah for the sick, except that the sickness is taking away his sin. And then also the hadith of the Prophet, he said that Allah is continuing to write down for him as exactly what he used to do when you were well. So I encourage you to use your life now. So it goes back to our subject. So you was backbiting, slandering, and Ghiba or Abu Ghiba on every day, then that's what's on your record when you're sick. Write down exactly what he used to do when he was well. Well, he was backbite, slander, he ain't make it salat. So what? So you have nothing. But if you were doing all those things, when people come to see you, at that point, when you visit the sick, man, that brother in good shape right now. He used to be at the masjid every day. Now Allah Ta'ala, through his mercy, is still rewarding him in that sense. So when you go visit the sick and all that, that's why you say, you should comfort them. Remember, you should remind them always, say, look, Allah's mercy is on you right now, man. Because I know you used to pray, I know you used to do these things, and alhamdulillah, Allah is continuing to bless you. So all those things are blessings for us. And we have to look at our Islam in the light of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Because remember, many of the things, in particular growing up in the West, we are indoctrinated with kufr. So we learn to think more like the kufr tell us to think than the Muslim. We see life through the eyes of kufr. Because everything around us defines what life is. I mean, we get desensitized to all their holidays. Like the other day, what was yesterday was the pagan festival of Halloween, right? And then you see some Muslims Halloween. I'm sitting in the brother's store yesterday, and here come this family of Muslim, salam alaikum, and the little child dressed up as the wicked witch with the broom coming in the restaurant. And you're like, salam alaikum, your child dressed up for a pagan festival. Right? So somehow, being in the West, he has become desensitized to the haram. Right? And it ain't that bad. Right? If the Prophet ﷺ, it wasn't that bad, then the Prophet ﷺ would have told us it was okay. But since that wasn't the case, then we avoid it. But you see these type of things. Or you see the Muslim now that he wants the Christmas tree. Or, and he, like he's in the mall, and these are all things like the sister took a picture of it. The Muslim in the line waiting to take his child to sit on Santa Claus's knee. Right? And so now they're taking the Santa Claus's knee, and this is in the Pentagon Mall, right? So, so this is a Muslim that's lost the perspective, and that's the definition of Islam. Because remember, when the Prophet defined, when the scholars of Islam define Islam, how do they define Islam? If someone asks you what is Islam, what would you tell them? Give me a definition for, okay, let's start. Give me the definition of deen, because this is very important. Huh? Way of life. Any other?
Following a religion.
Religion. What does religion mean?
Your beliefs.
Okay. Now, all these are aspects, but remember, when we take this, because when they heard deen, when the Arabs heard deen, with the Prophet ﷺ, deen had 4 aspects, right? What was the first word? Deen, dana, yadinu, ta'a, yati'u. It meant to obedience. This is the first aspect of deen. Religion, remember, religion comes from who? Webster marrying from a Latin root. So somehow we take this word religion and we impose it on the word deen and say deen means religion. How does deen mean what Webster or Oxford's dictionary said it was? We should go back to what Allah and His Messenger said it meant. So when we say deen meant, they gave it 4 categories in Lisan al-Arab and the scholars of Islam. Deen, the first thing meant ta'a, yati'u, obedience. Then villa, to humble oneself. Then inqiyad and khudu'. Now the difference between inqiyad and khudu', inqiyad means you allow yourself to be led by something and you're not resisting it. Khudu', yeah, but khudu' is also submission, but they're different. And when they look them from the Lisan al-Arab, from the lexicons, inqiyad means to be submissive but not fighting it. Inqiyaduhu bi-ta'a. With obedience. You're doing it, and you're allowing yourself to be led, and you're not resisting. وَلَا وَرَبُّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُ حَتَّى يُحَاكِمُوكَ فِي مَا شَجَرَ بَيْنَهُمْ. That's where the ayah comes in. So when I talk about deen in Islam, it's not religion, because how can I take a Latin word and say, now this word means what Allah means? But we use that word because in the West has said religion, right? And religion means way of life or to worship something. But Islam, when they say deen in Islam, it means to be obedient, to be submissive, to humble oneself, and to be allowing yourself to be guided by something, not resisting. And then for the definition of, okay, shukran. For the definition of Islam, it's the same thing. Islam, we always get what? Peace?
Yes.
Peace. Now, some of your Arabs, you went to Arab schools, what the definition? هو استسلام لله بالتوحيد والانقياد له بالطاعة وتخلص من الشرك وخلوص من الشرك وبراء من أهله. So Islam has 4 words as well that defines Islam. هو istislam first. That means total surrender. How? Bitawheed. Mean wahada shay'an, to do everything for Allah. So the first concept of when I say I'm a Muslim, that I'm surrendering myself bitawheed means I'm doing it with sincerity, purity of worship for Allah. Wa inqiyadu lahu bitta'a. And now I'm allowing myself to be guided by Allah, obedient. I'm not resisting. You know, people be resistant. Yeah, I know that's true, but mashallah, you know, Allah knows my intention. Yeah, Allah knows your intention right there because you ain't doing nothing. So you done showed your intention. Your intention is to do the haram. Right? So the inqiyadu lahu bitta'a means I allow myself to be guided by Allah, obedient. Then what khulusu min ash-shirk, then purifying oneself from shirk. Meaning that anything that has to do with shirk, I'm purifying myself from it. I'm sincerely backing away from it. So if a person practices Islam, he ain't taking his child to sit on Santa Claus's knee. Or he ain't got his daughter showing up, you rolling in the store talking about Assalamu alaikum, well, here comes the little wicked witch of the West behind him. Right? These things to show you don't have khulus, you don't have sincerity of purifying yourself from shirk. Wa bara'u min ahli, and having nothing else to do with the family. So if I was saying that my deen is Islam means my obedience, my humility before Allah Ta'ala is what? Total surrenderance to His will in Tawheed, and allowing myself to be guided with Him without any resistance, purifying myself from shirk, and having nothing else to do with the people who practice it. Meaning I'm not trying to gather onto these things and say, okay, I'm going to join these shirk-like organizations, or I'm going to happy hour with you, but I ain't drinking. You know, like you see these things that the Muslims do. These are all cases that I've seen. So, but I don't want nothing else to do with the family of shirk. So when we can no longer, when we make the mistake in the West, we take the kufr word and we make that word Islam. So we say Islam is a religion, and we say religion, and you look in the West to worship. That's why you can conclude the worship, Hinduism, Buddhism, the rat, cat, dog, or whatever you want to worship in is worship. But in Islam, no. That's why Allah said, in the deen, in the Allahi Islam. Verily, obedience before Allah Ta'ala, obedience, humility before Allah Ta'ala, and showing no resistance to the Creator is istislam. It's total surrender to His will and tawheed. And allowing myself now to be guided by that. So this is the definition you should have in your head. We cannot no longer take what Webster gives us in Islamicized Webster. Because the kuffar is not doing that. Right? You know, if you tell them, like religion means, and you write this down like this, you lost your mind. Right? Because they ain't accepting that definition. Because they said, Webster doesn't say that. Oxford doesn't say that. My religious studies teacher didn't say that. But we as Muslims have to take the definition given to us through the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the scholars and take that in the way that Arabs heard it. Because that's why it angered them so much. Because he said, what you mean that your deen, that Quraysh said, what you mean now that I have to be obedient to the one God? That I got to humble myself before Him and I got to do it without any resistance? He said, no, we can't accept that. Because remember, that's where their argument came with the Prophet ﷺ, because they offered him that job. Look, you worship your God for 1 year, 1 month, and we worship ours. We swap on and off. And deen doesn't allow for that. That's why he said, Lakum dinukum waliya din. To you be your ta'ah, your obedience, and to us be our obedience. But our obedience is based upon istislam bi tawheed, with total surrenders with tawheed. Their istislam is based not on that. So to use religion for Islam is an improper term. Because as a Muslim, so what are you saying when you're Muslim? You're saying you're Muslim, you're carrying these 4 characteristics. You're saying I carry characteristic of I'm surrendering myself to Allah by tawheed, by unifying everything for Allah, that I'm looking to the Quran and Sunnah to see what my way of life is, that I'm inqiyadu lahu bi ta'a, that I'm allowing myself now to be guided by Allah without any resistance, and khulusu min ash-shirk, and I'm purifying myself from shirk. I mean, I don't want anything to do with the shirk wa bara'u min ahli, and you can clearly see in my conduct that I have nothing to do with it, meaning that you hate those type of things in your heart. You may not go around and hold a sign and say Halloween is haram, but you say, man, you see, that day is pagan. In your heart, in your soul, you don't want nothing to do with it. You don't want your children, you don't want the next generation, so you begin to educate the Muslim away from those things. And many times what happens is we don't allow ourselves to be educated away from these things. We're living in the West, we become desensitized, we become acceptable. We accept things and they say, oh, mashallah, that's just their way of life. But yeah, that's their way of life, but that is the way of life. Who invented that way of life? That's from the shaitan. This is all from the waswas of the shaitan. Because so what we see is a manifestation of what shaitan is given. Because remember, if Allah's Messenger ﷺ or Allah Ta'ala told us that these things are forbidden, then we take them as forbidden. You know, so again we have to get away from calling Islam peace. Right? Because we have to not use what the kuffar tells us the definition of our faith is. We have to use what Allah told us and what the books of the lexicons and the hadith define our Islam. That's why the every obedience, every type of humility, every type of humbleness has its khulq, has its characteristics. Islam in the khulq, in the characteristics of one who's surrendering himself to Allah without any resistance is haya. And again, I always define these words because what we define haya as? Shyness. So what is shyness? Shyness is a sign of weakness, right? When you say that guy's shy or she's shy, that's weak, ain't it? Don't we use that to be weak? So the word in Arabic doesn't mean that. Because if you look at the word in the Arabic and when they define that, when they give the sharh that hadith, they say, he said to abandon anything that will cause a blemish on your record before Allah Ta'ala, in your speech, in your actions, in your deed. So he said with every deen, and so haya, that's what haya means in Islam. Because why you say Allah is hayy? You say Allah is shy? No, Allah will do nothing that show you that He is not Allah. If Allah promises something, He gives you what He promised. Because He said, wa'ad Allah haq. So Allah ain't going to do anything to blemish His reputation as Allah Ta'ala. That's not shy. You Jabbar, you're not shy. You Kabir, how you shy? Right? You Jalal. You have all these attributes to show that. So when we say hayat, you know, Islam hayat, and the characteristic of the Muslim is that he will do nothing that will blemish his reputation before Allah. So that's why I say it's very important many times that we go back to the way that the Sahaba, or the explanation, the way the Sahaba understood the word. Because many times, again, we have adopted the word shyness, and shyness is a Western concept that is a concept of weakness, because shyness can never understand. So the characteristic of this deen is to be shy, right? So, you know, so we shy when the Kaaba tell you want to drink. No, I don't drink. You say, no, I'm Muslim, that's haram, right? That's shy, right? But you say, I'm abandoning anything, but the word you abandon anything that may cause a blemish on your record with Allah Ta'ala, because you're worrying about Allah. That's why he said that's the characteristic of this deen. Every deen has a characteristic that makes it unique. So the uniqueness of Islam is that the Muslim is conscious and he wants to do nothing that will cause his record to be blemished before Allah Ta'ala. So, you know, I advise you sometime that we go back and we look at these terms and understand them. Because when I learned that hadith and I went back and read the explanation of the hadith, and you saw what they defined those words as, that hadith didn't mean that. You know, I mean, that's why when Isa, when the Prophet said one of the first things in the Nubuwwah, he said, if you feel no shame, they used it. And they used istahyi. Again, height. Right? If you're not worrying about your record being blemished, then you do whatever you want. In English, they say if you feel no shame, you do whatever you want. But the Arabic carries the concept, if you don't worry about your record being blemished, this is the first, as he said, of the first things that all the Anbiya brought, of the Nabuwah, of the Prophet. If you feel you're not worried about your record being blemished before Allah, you got no taqwa whatsoever, then do whatever you want. Right? But that means shyness don't mean that. Because you may feel shy, you go commit the haram behind closed doors. I'm a little shy, I ain't gonna do that out in the street. But if you wait till I get home, I'm gonna go buck wild, right? I mean, you know, that's shy. But that's not what the hadith is telling us. So when we get these misunderstandings from the English language, or from defining, that's why I say many times we cannot define our Islam through Webster, or Merriam-Webster, or Oxford, or whatever dictionary they're using this week. You got to go back to what the word meant originally in order for that. So it's time for Maghrib? Oh, yeah. So, we're going to break here. So, you come back after Maghrib or what?
You going to pray here? Pray here? We can pray here.
Okay, we pray here.
Muhammad, peace be upon his soul. The greatest of prophets, Islam was his only goal.
I give you a perfect example. There was a Kafir from Harvard named Jane Smith. She wrote a PhD on the use of the word Islam. And what her PhD thesis showed that the Muslim, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and what the word meant then, and the way the Muslim using it today is totally different. She took every century the major tafsir like Tabari, Ibn Kathir, and Qurtubi, and on up through Sayyid Qutb, and showed by the time you got to Sayyid Qutb, the use of the word Islam was not the way that the Sahaba had heard it. Because the Muslim, as it went through different countries and different places, they started adapting the word to what the language was of the people, instead of making the people adapt to Islam. And then just one point on da'wah. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he said, if the people of the book come to you, or they come to you, la tusaddiqu wa la tukadhibu. He said, do not confirm anything they tell you, or do not say it's a lie. Why is this? We have to understand this because in Islam, we have hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and we have a standard. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John supposed to be in the Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawood of the Christian world. But we can't use anything they say for the main reason is because there's no chain of transmitters. There's no narration, no hadathana, qala, and so on, so on, and so on. So the Prophet ﷺ told Sahaba, you cannot confirm or deny anything that they say. Because you have to hold their book that they call the Bible to the same standard you hold the Quran. You know, someone comes to you with something like, where you get that hadith from? I don't know if that's sahih. You need to check that. You go give da'wah and you start quoting the Bible, Jesus said that. If Jesus didn't say that, then you lying on the Nabi, alayhi salatu wasalam. So when we give da'wah, you got to give your da'wah from the book of Allah and through your akhlaq, because your character. Because that's the best way to give da'wah. Once you start quoting their book, and the Prophet ﷺ told you not to, now you're in opposition to what Allah and His Messenger said. We know many times we see these interfaith things and people be quoting it, but Allah Ta'ala, remember how he got red-faced at Umar, when Umar came with the Torah. And he told him, look, if Musa was here today, he would follow me. And then how are you going to quote something that you don't hold to the same standard of the Quran or Hadith? You have to hold the Bible to the same standard of the Quran or the Hadith. If you're not going to take a hadith that you say I can't confirm, or someone say that hadith is da'if or forged, then you're not going to use it. We know that their book has nothing but weak or forged hadith in it. Because nothing in there you can say Isa said it and confirm. Nothing in there we can say that Musa said it and confirm it. At least Allah Ta'ala has mentioned it in the Quran. Because we know clearly from the Quran, Allah Ta'ala quotes Isa as saying, وَمَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ جَنَّةً. He who associates anything with Allah, Allah has made forbidden in them the garden. So you have to be very careful many times when you're giving da'wah to people, that we don't use their methodology, that we use the methodology of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And that's why when we're talking about the words like hayat, there's two other terms you should understand beyond those, which is wara, right, and zuhud. You know these terms, wara? And we loosely define it as piety. So there's three terms, haya, wara, and zuhud. These are stages of Islam. And Ibn Taymiyyah in his Fatawa does a real good job in explaining this. And one thing we miss, wara, we define as piety, right? Now, in the Arabic, wara means, tarku ma yadurru bihi, mara. You say you abandon anything that will cause harm to you. Fi dunya or akhir, in this life or the next. This is piety defined in Islam. The Muslim, when he's pious, he will abandon something, right? That because he know it may be harmful to him. So, or it becomes doubtful to him. So the Muslim's not going to go and get involved in things that may be haram. Now, zuhud means you abandon something even if it's lawful to you out of fear of it taking you to the haram. So these are stages, people saying that brother's zuhud or he's wara, he's pious. If a person is pious, you can see it in their conduct. It means he abandoning anything that may cause him harm. Just like haya means you worry about blemishing your reputation with Allah. A person who's pious, he's worried about, these are the things Allah said is haram, so I'm going to abandon all these things because it's going to cause me some harm on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And then the zuhud, he's going to say, look, I'm not even going to deal with these things that are halal for me because it might take me to the haram. Because sometimes you may like something and you start liking that, like I use the sports example all the time. Guy be watching the game and he's going to be looking out the window to see when Maghrib going out because he got to see LeBron do this dunk or whatever. And so you got to abandon that because it's going to cause you harm because now you made that more important than your salah. That you're so worried about what's going to happen in that game that you can't even make your salah. So this is not only the fitna for you, but as you call yourself pious, this thing is harming you now. So, when we look at our lives, in particular as the West, we have to look at things that are causing us harm as Muslims. And then I'd like to ask you one question, because it's most important. We all say we love the Prophet ﷺ, but if someone will come to us and ask us, how did the Prophet ﷺ die? What would you tell them? What made him sick? Because this is something every Muslim should know.
Time.
Huh?
Time.
And I'll explain it to you. When the Prophet, the woman poisoned him, the Jewish woman poisoned the food, correct? She poisoned the lamb, and the Prophet ate it. And the poison was designed to cause the aorta, the valve to the heart, to explode and kill you. So when she gave him the poison and the meat spoke to him and said, don't eat it because it's poison. Remember, one of the Sahaba ate it and died. But it's very important that the Muslim knows about the death of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That this poison was designed, that when she put it in the meat, was designed to cause the Prophet to have a heart attack. To cause the valves to the heart to just explode. Right? And so remember the Prophet ate some and he remained sick. Right? And so the next point we like to get to, let's look at the last 6 hours in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. When was the last time he saw the Sahaba? At Fajr. But what did he do? This is very important that we know these things, because if we say we love the Rasul Islam, if you love somebody, if I'd ask y'all about RG3, boy, y'all get to giggling and say, I know how many.
Who's that?
Ask them brothers over here, they know. He's a quarterback for the Redskins, right?
Oh.
No, I know his stats for this weekend. I know how many. Oh man, that last one. I got listen all brothers in the masjid. Man, I can't understand what happened to that nigga. This is not the place for that in the masjid, right? But if I'd asked him, when was the last time our beloved Prophet ﷺ saw the Sahaba? What happened? Remember that morning that he died. And this is the last 5 hours of the Prophet ﷺ's life. That morning of the last day in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, at Fajr, he moved the curtain back. He smiled at Sahaba and he laughed. And remember, as Anas relates to hadith, he said when Abu Bakr saw the Prophet ﷺ, he started to move back. So the Prophet, he thought that the Prophet was coming to lead the Salah. And Anas said that the sight of the Prophet became such a fitna to them that they could no longer concentrate on their Salah. Now think about this. Here's the attitude of Sahaba that we should have about the khushu'. They said the Prophet's face became a fitna to them, that they could no longer concentrate on their Salah. And they were so worried about their Salah to the point that when they saw the Prophet, they know that the Prophet was taking away from what they should have been doing. And they said when they saw him, and Abu Bakr said the Prophet signaled to him to continue on, and he closed the curtain. At that point, the Sahaba never saw the Prophet ﷺ again. He died before Dhuhr that day. So every Muslim should know what was the last time that the Sahaba saw the Prophet ﷺ. That should become very important. And also every Muslim should know what was the last thing that Aisha said the Prophet said before he died. He said, Bala Rafiqa A'la, Bala Rafiqa A'la. Contra, I want to be with the Most High Companion, which was Allah Ta'ala. And as Aisha said, even with this, she said, I knew that the Prophet ﷺ was speaking with the angel of death at that particular time. And that the angel of death was asking the Prophet ﷺ, did he want to take his soul? Because remember, it's important to understand that for you and I, the angel of death comes, right? And he just snatches our soul. Because the hadith said, وَإِنْ قِطَاعًا مِنَ الدُّنْيَا وَإِقْبَالُ الْآخِرَ نَزَّلَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ بَيِّضُ وُجُوهُ كَوُجُوهُ الشَّمْسِ وَمَعَهُ قُفْمٌ مِنْ أَكْفَانِ الْجَنَّةِ وَحُنُوطٌ مِنْ حُنُوطِ الْجَنَّةِ. When you're about to die, that angel comes to you. Remember, there's an angel comes to you. The first time you meet an angel that you know is an angel is at the point of death before you die. This is very important. But so this angel of death, before the angel of death comes to you, a believer, the kafir doesn't get this. Another set of angels come to you to give you the glad tidings that the angel of death is about to come to you. Don't fear. That's what I had. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ أَلَّا تَخَافُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا. This ayah is talking about before you die, before the angel of death comes to you, there's another angel comes to you, لَا تَخَافُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا. Don't fear, nor should you grieve. وَأَبَشِرُوا بِجَنَّةٍ. And they give you the glad tidings of Jannah. Right? He said, these angels come to you, and then the angel of death comes and takes your soul. And takes your soul through the nose of you. He takes it out through the nose. And the Prophet ﷺ said, and he takes it like a drop of water being poured out of the last drop of water just easing out of a glass. That's for the believer. But he said the non-believer, he snatches it like, he said, تَتَفَرَّقَ فِي جَسَدِهِ. And the non-believer tries to run away. His soul tries to run away inside of the body. And he said the angel snatches it out like a thorny branch being pulled out of wet wool. So when the angel came to the Prophet ﷺ, because they're the Anbiya, he asked permission to take his soul. Remember, he asked permission to take Musa's soul. And we know what Musa did to the angel. When the angel came, Musa punched the angel in the eye, right? Punched the angel's eye. Musa said, I don't know what you're doing here, but I'm going to take care of you. And Musa would, and remember when Adam, he came to Adam. And he told, time for you to die. And Adam said, whoa, hold up. I got 40 more. He said, no, you didn't. You gave him to Dawood. Now, I don't remember giving Dawood nothing. Right? I mean, because even the Anbiya at certain times didn't want to die. But out of respect for the Anbiya, the angels asked their permission. So when the angel came to the Prophet, as Aisha said, he said, Bala Rafiq, I want to go to my Most High Companion. And remember, he at that time was laying on the chest of Aisha, in her mid-area here, as Aisha recorded, that she said he was dead. He said, and then she said she became the most fortunate of women, because she said at the point of death of the Prophet, ﷺ, she kissed the Prophet. And her saliva mixed with the Prophet ﷺ, and she said she was of the most fortunate of women. And these are little things in the life of the Prophet. The last 5 hours, I encourage all of you should go home and read it. Because many of you were born Muslim, but if someone asks you what Christmas is about, you can break down the story. This is supposed to be about the death of Christ on the cross and all this other old nonsense that they done made up about Isa. And we know it, even though you're not even Christian. But if someone was to ask you, well, what happened in the last 5 hours in the life of Muhammad ﷺ? We have no idea. Because after he saw the Sahaba, remember after that he started to see his family. He talked to Hassan and Hussein. And he told that his wives and they wanted to take care of Hassan and Hussein. Because he knew that Fatima was going to die soon. And that they would be without their mother. So he encouraged his wives to take care of Hassan and Hussein. As he told Fatima, then Fatima came in and he whispered in Fatima's ears that he wouldn't be with her after today. And she cried. And then after that, he told her that you will be the first of my family to join me. And she laughed. So these are things that happened. Then he sat with his wives and he counseled with his wives. He talked to all his wives and brought them together and talked to them. And then who else he talked to that day? He talked to Osama bin Zayd, right? And he put Osama bin Zayd in charge of the army. And as Aisha said, he loved Osama. And then he blessed Osama. He was putting his hands up, blessing Osama. And then also the last person was there was Abu Bakr's son, Abdul Rahman, with Aisha. And Abdul Rahman was the one who gave the Prophet ﷺ the mishwak. And they said, and he cleaned his teeth. And this was the last action of the Prophet ﷺ. All these things should be important to us as Muslims. Because if you know, in school they teach you Napoleon's history and all these other nonsense, kufrs is going to be nothing but fuel for the fire. And mashallah, you got to learn them things for dunya purposes. But we should be familiar with how the Prophet ﷺ died and what happened. And how did they pray his janazah? Do we know? Because this is important when explaining. Because remember, the janazah of the Prophet is not the way we pray our janazahs today. Because remember, they say the prophets are buried where they die. So when the Prophet ﷺ died, they buried him, they dug the hole in Aisha's compartment to bury him. And then everybody came in and prayed the janazah in that room. And they came in 10 at a time. First the Muhajirin, then the Ansar, then the women, then the children. And it took from that afternoon at Asr to after Isha, almost to Fajr, before they finished praying over the Prophet ﷺ, before they finished his prayer for his janazah. So the way we pray janazah was not the way they prayed the janazah of the Prophet ﷺ. And then when they washed the body of the Prophet, all these are little facts that I'm just going to give you, I encourage you to read it. How did they wash the Prophet's body? Today when we wash the body of an individual, we take their clothes off, whatever. And as Ali and them said, they didn't want to unclothe the Prophet ﷺ, so they didn't know what to do. And so they fell, they got into almost a sleep came over them. And Allah had someone, they said an angel came from outside of the door and whispered into them, he said, wash the Prophet's body in his clothes. So they washed the Prophet ﷺ body with his clothes on. And as Abbas, and who was it? Abbas. His family washed his body. And that's important for us to understand. Abbas and Ali and Sukran, who was one of the servants who lived in the house of the Prophet ﷺ. And Osama bin Zayd and these people who were closest to the Prophet washed his body. They washed his body with his clothes on. And they wrapped him in 3 cloths. And then they put him back on that on the bed in Aisha's room, and that's where he stayed until the next day when they buried him. So, but these are little things that we should know, that are very important for us as Muslims to be familiar with. Because if we're not, how can you say you love the Rasul ﷺ and you know nothing about his life? And you know more, not being Muslim, you may know about the fake death, the lie about the death of Isa. Right? If I ask you, well, what did the Christians say? Oh, they said Isa died on the cross. Right? And we go on with the fake story forever. What's Easter? Easter supposed to be when the resurrection of Diya. Another lie. And we know that lie. And we know a lie after the lie. We know the Halloween lie, the Thanksgiving lie, the Easter, Christmas, New Year's lie as well, right? And so we know all these pagan lies. But the most important individual in our life, the one that we say we model our life after, the Prophet ﷺ, we're many times clueless. Not unlike the whole story. We don't want to go back what happened 10 days or 8 days or something like that. But we should have a talk about that, to go take 10 days out in the last 10 days in the life of the Prophet ﷺ and discuss them and talk about and see what happened in those 10 days. But I just summarized the last 5 hours in the life of the Prophet ﷺ.
What was the Nabi's last word to his ummah?
No, remember, he spoke to them like 2 days before, right? And of the last things he said, and there's several different versions. One of the last things when he told them that the Jews and the Christians had to be removed from the Arabian Peninsula, right? That was of the last talks that he gave. And then there was another talk that he continued. He wanted to write something down, and the Sahaba got to argue. And the Prophet became sick and he never did it. So some talk about that. He talked about, of the last speeches that he gave, is when he talked about 2 days before about removing the Jews and the Christians from from the Arabian Peninsula, and also do not take his grave as the Christians and the other ones had as a place for worship. So these are of the last things that he said was in the last 2 days. Because remember, the Prophet ﷺ, in that last week when he was sick, they moved him to the house of Aisha where he died. Right? But these are very important incidents because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, if one of you, usiba bi musibatin, if you are infected or some tragedy happens to you, you're supposed to take strength in my musibah, in my death, in my tragedy. Because he said, He said, لَن يُصَابَ مُصِيبَةٍ بَعْدِ أَشَدَّ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ مُصِيبَتِي. He said, there will never be a tragedy greater for you after this than my death. So how can we take strength when something happens to us? When our loved ones die or they're sick and we just get hysterical. We're supposed to reflect back on the death of the Prophet. That's what the Prophet told us. And you're supposed to take strength because we know that no death is supposed to be near to us. Because he said, none of you is believing until you love me more than you love your children, your family, anybody, or all of mankind. But how can I take strength and live this hadith if I don't know about the death of the Rasulullah? Now here's a perfect example of a hadith you can't live if you don't know the seerah of the Prophet. If you don't know those last 5 hours of how he died, how can you use that for strength when you're affected with some tragedy in your life? So this is why I mention that, because there's a hadith that the Prophet told us what to do. So this is a requirement for us to learn the seerah of the Prophet and curse that Jewish woman, whose name was Zainab, who poisoned the Prophet. Remember, he forgave her, but then when the Sahaba died, he ordered them to cut her head off because for the death of the Sahaba at that particular time. But that's important, and also we should know who buried the Prophet. And this is where we get the false stories about what happened in Medina after the death of the Prophet. We forget that Ali was highly upset when the Prophet was. If your uncle dies or your cousin died, you ain't gonna be worried about who's gonna be the next Khalifa, right? You worried about burying the Prophet. So Ali, as opposed to the Orientalist stories and the other ones said, well, Ali didn't agree. He didn't take the bay'ah to Abu Bakr. Ali didn't take bay'ah because that afternoon, Umar, Abu Bakr, and Ubayd ibn Jarrah was walking through the souk, right? Ali was there comforting the daughter of the Prophet and his grandchildren, Fatima, and his Hassan and Hussein, and with the rest of his wives. He was in the quarters worrying about the death of the Prophet. He had no time to worry about who's the next Khalifa. But the Orientalists say, well, see, some of the Sahaba didn't agree. This is the statements of the Munafiqeen, right? But when they walked through the souk, remember that the Ansar of Medina wanted to choose 2 Khalifas. But Abu Bakr said no. He said, you are the Umara, and and we are, you are the helpers, and we are the Umara. We are the commanders of this faith, right? So he said, but Abu Bakr wanted to choose Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, right? He said, if you want to choose a Khalifa, choose Abu Ubaidah. They said no. Umar said, we choose you. And Abu Ubaidah said, we choose you, Abu Bakr, as the Khalifa. And that's how Abu Bakr was chosen. And then after that, just one second, many of the Ansar and those people there took bay'ah to Abu Bakr. And then the next day, people started taking bay'ah. Ali didn't show up. Uthman didn't show up. Uthman was in a state of shock. Uthman couldn't speak. He went into a state of shock at the death of the Prophet. Uthman loved the Prophet. That was his boy in Jahiliyyah as well, right? And so he was in a state of shock, so he didn't take bay'ah. Ali didn't take it because he was, like I said, he was with Fatima, he was with Hassan and Hussein, he was with the rest of the people in the Prophet's household. He was worrying about washing the body, digging the grave, burying them, and then making sure that the family was secure. Because think about it, if that happened to your grandfather or your uncle died today, and you had a meeting of the MSA, what are you going to, the meeting of the MSA or to go help your mother? You're going to help your mother. But here's what the hypocrites say, oh, some of the Sahaba didn't agree. But see, because remember, unlike today, where we got CNN, internet, you chat, tweet, and everything else you do with that on your telephone, the word got around. Because remember, there was a tabi'in, because he wasn't a Sahaba, because he never met the Prophet, but he lived in the name Abu Muslima, who came from Yemen. He was the one that the Prophet ﷺ had sent on an assassination mission in Yemen, and he was coming to tell the Prophet ﷺ that they had killed these people in Yemen. And when he arrived 45 days after the death of the Prophet, he didn't know that the Prophet had died. So many people didn't find out for 2-3 months later, because news traveled via caravan. But the hypocrites went out first with the stories. Oh man, they got all types of chaos in Medina. Ali ain't take no bay'ah. Uthman ain't take bay'ah. These were lies developed by the hypocrites, the Jews and the Christians, that the Orientalists teach at the universities and other places today to say that there was disunity amongst the Muslims. But that wasn't the case. And it's very important that when we study seerah, that's why I said we have to study things from the Islamic perspective. That's why with these words like deen and Islam, we have to understand these words from the Islamic perspective. You know, that's why I hate when they say that shyness is part of our deen, and then the word in Arabic doesn't even mean to be shy. It means not to do anything that will blemish your reputation. We have to get back to what our deen means according to our understanding that the Sahaba had, you know, and not basing it on the English language. Because the English language waters down because the language of the Quran. And it doesn't do it justice. You know, just like I was talking to the brother about salam, because when Uthaymeen does a beautiful book on the Asma of Allah Ta'ala, wa Sifat, and when he explains like Quddus, like Samad, I give you a perfect example with the Surah Ikhlas. Say, He, God is one, they always say. Qul huwa Allahu ahad. But what was the question that they asked the Prophet? He said, what? Give us the lineage of your Lord. So this surah is supposed to define how the Muslim should see, answer the question about someone asks you about the lineage of your Lord. Qul huwa Allahu, I say Allah Ta'ala is ahad. But what is Allahu Samad? Now to the Arab they say Samad, the eternal absolute or whatever. And then, but Samad was to the Arabs meant Sayyidu Samad. They used to call a guy Samad, meaning that he had power via his tribe. To be Samad means you had to have a powerful tribe. That if you bothered me, right, you know you have to deal with me, you got to deal with my crew. So that's what Samad means. But Allah, so you can't be Ahad and Samad. It was impossible. How can you be one and then be Samad? Because to the Arabs, Samad meant that you had some lineage. If I killed you, your cousin, your son, and everybody else gonna come get me. But Allah said, I am one and I'm Samad. Meaning my lineage is one and also I'm Samad. Means if you bother me, I am Jabbar. And everything else, I can deal with you as one. Allahu Samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad. And this, all these ayahs are related. When we read Surah Ikhlas, we should see the relationship of the ayah. Allahu Ahad, Allahu Samad. You cannot be, to the Arab mind, you cannot be Ahad and Samad. So Allah's lineage was one, and also he could deal with you as though he was a tribe. And then he begets none, nor is he begot. Meaning he is not born of anyone. That Allah Ta'ala is bila kayf, as we don't know, understand. When there's kufuwan ahad, and there's nothing that you can imagine can match up to Allah Ta'ala. Right? So when we read the surah, do we look at the surah in isolation, the ayahs, or do we see the ayahs that relate to the other ayahs? The same thing with Surah Al-Fatiha. Okay, now when we read this part of Surah Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een, now we into our dua in Surah Al-Fatiha, right? We done went through Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, because Rahman and Rahim, we understand these as the attributes of Allah Ta'ala. And we know Rahim, the Rahmah, is reserved for the believer on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Rahman means he gives graciously to everyone else, regardless of whether, that's why Bill Gates can be a billionaire, because the dunya means nothing, right? So Allah gives to you whether you believe in him or not, right? So that's the Rahmah of Allah Ta'ala, right? But the Rahim, the mercy of Allah is reserved for the believer. وَكَانَ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَحِيمًا, and I will be to the believer merciful. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. What we get? What was next? Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. This statement is a statement of knowledge. How can you say all praises to Allah Rabbil Alameen if you don't understand what Alameen, that you have studied the creation and you understand your Lord? We give you the absolute miracle. You look at this right here. This is a miracle from Allah Ta'ala. Your fingertip, right? Banana. Why everyone's fingertip, science tells you is different. No two of these are alike. Right? So this is a mercy, this is a mu'jiza. Every time you look at your hand is a mu'jiza. It's a miracle from Allah Ta'ala. But we just we look at it like nothing. We don't give shuk, no thanks to Allah when you look at your hand. But so when I say Rabbil Alameen, I'm saying all praises to a Lord of everything in this creation. And I know this because I've looked at creation. We look at the Chesapeake. That is a mu'jiz of Allah Ta'ala, as he talks about. He said he made them and the two don't cross. So we see this area and what they call it, I forget the name, the ecological name right now. Y'all remember, right? One of y'all young students should remember, right? But where the salt water and the fresh water doesn't cross, right? But Allah tells you that in the Quran, right? So we see in the Chesapeake is of the mu'jiz of Allah Ta'ala. So we see all these things from the air that we breathe, from the way everything is. This is Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Then we go repeat Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Then what next thing we stating? We making a statement that Allah is Maliki Yawmiddin. This is a statement that you're saying, I know I'm going to face my Lord on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So this is another statement of knowledge. You know, that's why if you've been saying, how many times you say the Fatiha? 6,000 times a year for you, brother, at least if you're making your 5 salah, right? So you done said something 6,000 times a year, 10 years, 60,000 times. You should have a deeper understanding than the new Muslim than to say it 17 times for the first time. So when I say, Maliki Yawmiddin, I'm understanding what we said, that when I die, that this Qiyamah to Sughra, that you're the master of that judgment, and then you're the master of Yawmiddin. Now here's this word deen again. Now why do we use the word deen for religion in one place, and now we use this word deen to mean day of judgment? Same word, right? Yeah. Why we change the meaning in English? Because deen, again, that is the day that everything will have ta'atullah, that everything will be obedient to Allah. That's why it's called Maliki Yawmiddin. Master of the day, La yatakallamuna illa man adhana lahu rahmanu wa qala sawaba. On a day that no one's going to be able to speak except whom Allah Ta'ala permits, and he's going to speak. This is deen. That's why Allah uses Yawmiddin. This is the language. This is the word deen again. You wouldn't say day of religion, right? But we say deen here to mean day of judgment, mean the day that everything going to be forced to be obedient to Allah. Ain't nobody going to be talking about, look, Allah ain't God on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Because Allah even let you know that through the hadith. He said they're going to be running to say, get the judgment on. Just judge us and send us to hell because we just can't deal with this anymore. Right? And they will go to the prophets and eventually they will go to Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, and he will make shafa'a. That's why when we hear the adhan, what we supposed to say? Allahumma rabbi da'wata tamati wa salata qa'ima ati Muhammadin wasila wa fadila wa maqamin mahmudin. Now what is wasila wa fadila? Now the Prophet alayhi salam told us wasila is, we making a dua for the Prophet because wasila is the utmost part of Firdaus. It is one home in Jannah called al-wasila wa fadila. So the Prophet said in a hadith in Bukhari, which is Sahih, he said when you hear the adhan, you say grant Muhammad a wasila wa fadila, meaning that best home in Jannah, there's only one person will get wasila in Jannah. Then he said, wa maqam and mahmud. And what is the maqam and mahmud? That station to intercede, to ask Allah to start the judgment on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So this is when we say, Maliki Yawmiddin, we're saying that we understand all these principles that I just spoke of and more. Then say, what after that? Man, Iyyaka na'budu. Now we said, after I acknowledge that Allah, that you are the one that I praise, that I understand, that I have to stand for. So because of that, now I'm making this statement of Aqeedah. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. You alone, Allah, I'm going to worship because you Rabbil Alameen. You Maliki Yawmiddin. You Rahman Ar-Rahim. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Only you I'm going to tafawwidu amri. I'm going to refer my affairs back to for assistance. Right? Ihdina sirata mustaqim. Then guide me to the straight. Now you're asking Allah to guide me. Then the Fatiha again. Ihdina sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. Now you're asking for a particular path. Not just to guide me to the straight path. You want Allah not only to guide you there, but because of my study, I know that there's a path that an'amta alayh, that you are blessed. The Siddiqeen, the Shuhada, the Salihin wa Anbiya, right? The prophets, the messengers, the martyrs, the pious, and the truthful. I want to be on their path. That ain't the people of Ghiba, all this other nonsense, the people of Haram. So that's my next statement in Al-Fatiha, right? Then he said, Surat al-Ladina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Now this Uthaymeen brings a good point on this. In other writers of tafsir, maghdubi alayhim waladdallin is not just the Christians and the Jews. That's any path that's in opposition to what Allah Ta'ala and His Messenger brought. Remember, he said, Allah, the most hated thing in the sight of Allah. You don't want that path. Allah hates these people. All these type of people, you saying Allah don't put me on their path. The people that angered you, you know, like the people of the wigs and and all this other stuff, and the pants falling off their behind, they're looking like the retro faggots and stuff like, excuse me, because that's what it is, and I told you that last, because that comes from the retro homosexual prison faggot, right? Because that's what, who wore it first was the homosexuals in prison, right? So he said, Allah, don't put me on that path. Don't let me be running around with my pants fall off my butt with my underwear showing, because I look like a faggot, right? From prison. One that's been raped, 80, 90 times. So, you know, so I don't want that. So you're saying, Allah, don't make that fair seeming to me. Waladhalin, and those who've gone astray. So when we think about Fatiha, do we just read it or do we ponder what we just made this covenant with Allah? Now, I done made dua for all these things. So when you leave out of Fatiha, you done acknowledged Allah, you done asked Allah to give you something. So what are you supposed to do after that? We just go through Al-Fatiha, man, we run through it, don't remember, you don't even remember what you said half the time. Because that's why he said, part of your salat is supposed to be khushu'. That khushu', that's what the Sahaba had, because when they said when the Prophet came, they said it caused a fitna that they could no longer concentrate on the salat. Think about it, here's the Sahaba saying, look, I saw the Prophet and it was a fitna for me, because it was disturbing my salat. But do we look at things like that? Because they understood what Al-Fatiha meant to them. Because Allah would not give you something to say 6,000, 7,000 times a year if it wasn't the most important thing for you. So it's very important that when we read these things, we ponder and we reflect what we say. And I always encourage you to go home and think about Al-Fatiha and think about what you just said, what you just asked Allah Ta'ala for. And are you sincere to the dua you made? Or you just going through the motion? Most times we just going through the motion. Look, I'm making my 5. But are you making them the way that the Prophet ﷺ prescribed it? And that dua, so if you made this dua, you ain't going out doing these things because you just asked Allah to show you the straight path. Now you ask Allah to show you the straight path and you go right out the door and say, what you doing, huh? You meet me at the shisha bar, man? We go over there and look at the women and, you know, chill out. You ain't sincere to your Fatiha. Because you asked Allah to show you the Sirat al-Mustaqim. Right? But that ain't on the Sirat al-Mustaqim up in there. And as the Prophet ﷺ told us about, you know, you looking at these things or whatever, what are you doing? They got the music going up in there. What is that saying? They got this Haram, Tupac, or whoever they playing the day on in the background, saying all this other nonsense to your head. Right? So you don't want these type of things. So I encourage you, if you're sincere to in your Islam, right, then you should know what you're saying out of your mouth. Right? And take it seriously. So I just wanted to leave you with these two type, you know, things. Read the seerah of the Prophet and reflect on what you say in Al-Fatiha. Because too many of us we learn it, and you know, after you say something 6,000 times, instead of you post, just like if you in IT school, after you done that 6,000, 7,000 times, if the boss coming in, we gonna fire you. How you get that wrong, huh? You've been doing this for 5 years. How you mess this up? You read Al-Fatiha 35,000 times, you still committing haram akhi. What's Fatiha doing for you? Nothing. So if these things are working for you, you can see it in your actions, in your deeds, in your sincerity. So, you know, that's what I leave you with. And again, read the seerah. Because if you don't know the seerah of the Nabi Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, how can you love him? How can you love the Sahaba? You know what I mean? Like he said, go read the beautiful story, because the last dua we should make it, because remember the Prophet ﷺ said, when Allah says, when Allah loves someone, he calls out to Jibreel, Allah loves Fulan, so-and-so, so you love him. And Jibreel calls out to the other angels, say, Allah loves so-and-so, love him. And then they love him. So we want to be loved by the angels. We want our names to be mentioned by Allah Ta'ala. Then we have to do the things that can get our names mentioned by Allah. And like Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, remember the Prophet said about Sa'ad, 70,000 angels came to the janazah of Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh that had never came down to earth before. Right? And he said, you look at Hanbala, he said that the angels came and washed the body of Hanbala when he died. These are people, man, that have been mentioned. Now here's the angels. They said, Ittazzat Ashur Rahman, that the throne of Allah shook at the death of Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh. Because they loved it. Because that meant Allah had been mentioning his name in the heavens with him. So we should make dua that Allah mention our names in the heaven, and that the angels will want to come to our janazah. And as he said, that when they was carrying the body of Sa'ad, it was so light. And they said, why is he so light? Because Sa'ad was a big brother. 200-pound brother, right? He said, because how could it not be light when 70,000 angels were carrying the body of Sa'ad along with you? So we should want to die like this. You know, and how old was Saad when he died? He was in his 30s. He was a young brother. So we should take these type of things and reflect upon them, and inshallah, they will benefit us. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, wastaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
Allah knows.